Howdy, Immortalium here. At the recommendation of Archangel Manga, I'm going to be trying to film more of these reviews, opinions, etc, in more natural daylight. That won't always be possible, of course, but I will try to do it as long as I can. Now, this is going to be a review on Osamu Tezuka's Swallowing the Earth, which I got back in May. First thing to mention about this series is that it is his very first adult title. So basically, everything he did before this was targeted at children, but this is the very first thing he ever made that was targeted at adults instead. And for that reason, this manga is actually one of the messiest mangas I've read in a while. When I say messy, I don't mean that it was bad. You know, you can have a messy film and still have it really good. It's just he had a lot of ideas, and he attempted a lot, and while it worked sometimes, it didn't work in other cases. So let me just give you a quick, what the story is about. So basically, we're introduced to these two Japanese soldiers during World War II. They've just, captured a bunch of Americans, and one of the Americans has a picture, and the picture is of a woman called Zephyrus. He shows it to them, and they instantly fall in love with her, the Japanese. So they're asking everyone else, do you know anything about Zephyrus? And they're getting, completely, driven. Oh, we have to find her. We must find her. So basically, we cut to a couple of years later. It's after the war. One of them has become a very successful businessman. The other one, he's just a drunk, really. He's not much else. And they're still after Zephyrus. Now, one of them, Seki is his name. He has a son now called Gohan Matsu. And Gohan Matsu is actually our lead character. And basically, they ask Gohan Matsu to go to a hotel because they hear Zephyrus is going to be there. They want him to find out as much as they can. So, So that's kind of where the story begins. Now, what's messy about this, you might ask? Well, first of all, when we come to the art style, one can tell that Tezuka is still trying to get used to the more realistic art style introduced by the Kiga movement. In comparison to, say, Twin Knights that I read recently, and other, more shonen or shoujo-oriented manga, this, obviously has a more realistic-looking art style, more detailed, the proportions are more correct, but even then, it lacks the detail and the finesse shown by Tezuka in other manga like Ayako and Adolf and Mu and all that jazz. So you have this kind of realism introduced, but with a kind of cartooniness, which is kind of a bit of an odd mix. Now, it can look really good at points, the art style, but the majority of the time it's simply like, good. It's not brilliant. Now, is it bad art? No, but it could have been much better. But it's a fine first attempt by Tezuka for a more realistic art style. Like, in fairness, he's changing his art style, basically. Considering the fact that it doesn't look bad, that's actually pretty good. So, what about the story itself? Well, a lot of ideas are thrown into the story. So basically, the people, the Zephyrus people, they're doing this kind of big plot, all these kind of ideas that they want to do in order to try to sow chaos and all that jazz. The best idea that comes for them actually is this skin that they create, this artificial skin, which, just give me a moment and I'll find out what the title was. Dermoid Z, that was it. So basically what this Dermoid Z is you put it over yourself and you look like someone else. And that actually lends a lot to the story. It's a brilliant idea. It kind of reminds me of Battlestar Galactica, except that this was written in 1968, whereas even the original Battlestar wasn't done at that point, so the new Battlestar wasn't. But Point is, it's an ingenious idea. There's lots of kind of, twists and like, oh, who is they, who is the other one, etc., etc. So that's one of Tezuka's better ideas in this. But for some odd reason, he chose then throughout the story to, how can one describe it? He kind of made all these kind of mini-stories. Now, it's not that they're bad, these mini-stories, but they really interfere with the pacing of the plot. Now, I get what Tezuka was aiming for. This is, basically, these people, the Zephyrus group, are, causing massive destruction and chaos throughout the world. He's showing us, what's happening to the world. All these little stories within. And while they can be very good, it just completely throws the story out of whack. I mean, at the very least, one of the first kind of mini stories involving kind of a revenge plot, at the very least, it kind of linked back somewhat to the main story, even if it was a very minor way. But then there's some other stories that don't seem to have any relevance, even though it looks like they should. So, I get what he was aiming for, but it just didn't work well in the context of the overall story. Now, the characters. First of all, main character, Gohan Matsu. He's actually a surprisingly good character. His fatal flaw is that he's a complete and utter alcoholic. I mean, every, time he opens his mouth, it's like, I need a drink. Do you know where the drink is? And for some odd reason, he's kind of like a Popeye in a sense, in that he seems to be able to fight well when he gets, a bit of booze in him. So, but he's actually a really good man. He's honest. He loves his father. He wants to save people. It's just he's an alcoholic. So, as a character, he's actually quite good. Maybe not as good as some of the other characters Tezuka invented, but definitely, the fact that he's so honest and good, while balanced out with his kind of, obsession over alcohol, actually does work quite well in this story. Plus, it plays an extra part in it that, I won't spoil. One else now? Oh, of course, you have the Zephyrus group, which I must admit, in this story, there's no real good female characters. That's something I should point out. Now, I know this was the late 60s in Japan, so it's hardly going to be feminist pieces. But even then, in many of Tezuka's earlier stories, at least the very least, you had decent female characters. Whereas in this, a lot of the female characters, just seem to be... They're just there to act as antagonists. They're kind of like femme fatales. But of course the problem with the idea of the femme fatale is that, it's unnatural for... okay. What the idea of the femme fatale is that it's a woman who is strong, who is able to compete with the men, and this makes her evil. Not only that, but also she's kind of very sexy, she's voluptuous, she's a temptress. And Zephyrus is all like that. She is a temptress. She is maybe not evil per se, but she definitely has bad intentions. And none of those characters are great. So that is a problem with this story. So don't go into this looking for great women characters. Another thing I must admit is that, okay, if you buy a Tezuka book in, I think even in the original Japanese, there's always this disclaimer that, you have to be careful for, his portrayal of the races and all that, because he never intended this and all that jazz. He just simply took, what the Americans were doing. So, I never really took any note of it, really, in the other stories. Like in Buddha, or in Adolf, or in Ayako, or even in Mu. I never really saw anything particularly racist. In this story, though, was the first time I actually kind of noticed, and I went, ooh, you know, that's kind of a bit off. Like, there's a bit where Gohan Matsu's on an island with a bunch of natives, and the way they're drawn and the way they're portrayed is very, very kind of, ugh, you know? Just, it's not a good portrayal, and it's very uncomfortable at points. Now, I have been aware of this for a long time, and of course, as I said, this has a disclaimer in it as well, so, you know, it's not like I wasn't warned, and as I know, Tezuka wasn't intending anything bad against these natives. It just, you know, that's how the Americans drew them, and so that's how he drew them. So, yeah. So, did I like this? It was better than I expected it to be. I've heard a lot of bad rap on this. I mean, because it's his first adult story, you know, a lot of people criticize it, calling it messy, calling it, you know, stupid in a sense. I think there's a lot of great ideas in this that just, it's a flawed work, and that's how I'm gonna call it. Basically, I enjoyed it, even with its flaws. Now, is it a great manga? No. Is it a good one? Yes. And is it an essential part of Tezuka's, you know, progression as a mangaka? Definitely. So, do I recommend this manga? Yes, I do. But for people who are just generally into manga, you should probably try to find it cheap, although that's not easy now considering it's out of print. But for the Tezuka enthusiast, definitely it's an essential part of the collection. Because, as I said, it's progression, you know, there's lots of great ideas in it. So, yeah, am I glad to have read this? Definitely. And did I enjoy it? Yeah, a good bit of points. Just some bits, you know, could have been much improved and much better handled. But overall, you know, this is, you know, like, I actually kind of prefer this over the Book of Human Insects, to be honest. I thought, and the Roro. I prefer it over the Roro, but like by a mile. So, thank you for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye-bye.